Amanda Voss, the youngest female CEO in her industry, walked into the ballroom with the kind of confidence people photographed for magazines, though inside she was exhausted beyond words. For weeks she'd been running 3 back-to-back product launches, barely sleeping, barely remembering to eat. The gala was supposed to be a short appearance, a smile for investors, a toast for the cameras, but as the lights blurred and the music throbbed in her ears, she felt the room tilt. She brushed it off at first, blaming the stress, but her vision tunneled, faces melting into darkness. The last thing she heard was a worried gasp before everything slipped away. Amanda woke with a jolt, heart pounding, expecting to see white hospital lights above her. Instead, she was staring at a ceiling of old metal beams, lit by a single flickering bulb. The air smelled of engine oil and warm rubber. Her head throbbed as she slowly pushed herself upright, confused and disoriented. She wasn't on a stretcher or in a private clinic, she was lying on a makeshift cot. A faint humming of tools filled the background. This was a garage, not a recovery room. Panic rose in her chest, until she noticed a soft rustling beside her. A little girl, not more than 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring on a torn sheet of paper. When she noticed Amanda stir, her bright eyes widened with gentle curiosity rather than fear. "You're awake," she chirped, scrambling to her feet. Her voice echoed through the garage, surprisingly warm in the cold, industrial space. Amanda blinked at her, trying to form words, her CEO composure nowhere to be found. The girl held out a cup of water with both hands, as if presenting treasure. "Daddy said to give you this when you wake up." Amanda accepted the water, hands shaky. Where am I?" she murmured. The girl pointed proudly toward a half-assembled car lifted on jacks. "Daddy's garage. He found you." Amanda tried to remember anything after collapsing, but her mind was blank. Her phone wasn't in her hand, wasn't on the table, nothing. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never experienced. The girl tugged lightly at the corner of the blanket covering her. "Daddy said not to be scared. You were sleeping like a princess." Footsteps approached from the other side of the garage, steady, confident, but not hurried. A tall man in a grease-stained shirt stepped into view, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression held a mix of concern and calm professionalism. "Glad you're up," he said. "I'm Daniel. I brought you here because you fainted outside the gala hall. Ambulances were delayed because of a pile-up nearby. You were breathing fine, just dehydrated. I didn't think leaving you on the sidewalk was a good idea." Amanda stared at him, stunned by the simplicity and sincerity of his explanation. Daniel continued, sensing her confusion. "Security said they'd look for your contacts once things cleared, but you didn't have ID on you, just your dress and a dead phone." Amanda felt a wave of embarrassment wash through her. She prided herself on control, order, preparedness. Yet here she was, in a stranger's garage, rescued like someone who had forgotten how to care for herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered without knowing exactly what for. Daniel simply shrugged. "Exhaustion happens. You looked like you hadn't slept in days." The little girl climbed back onto her small stool, watching Amanda with open fascination. "Daddy carried you all by himself," she announced proudly. Amanda's cheeks warmed. Daniel cleared his throat, embarrassed. "She exaggerates. You're lighter than that transmission over there." Amanda managed the hint of a smile. Despite the unfamiliarity, despite the shock of waking in an auto shop, something about the place, about them, felt safe. And that feeling was more surprising than anything else. Amanda shifted, trying to stand, but her legs wobbled beneath her. Daniel stepped forward quickly, steadying her without hesitation yet without overstepping. His hands were warm, firm, and careful, the way someone handles something valuable but fragile. "Easy," he said quietly. "You were out for almost 5 hours. Your body's still catching up." Amanda blinked in surprise. 5 hours. She had never slept that long uninterrupted in months. The realization hit her harder than the fainting. Her life was so chaotic that unconsciousness in a stranger's garage was the first real rest she'd had in ages. The little girl hopped to her side, tugging at Amanda's sleeve with unfiltered affection. "I made you soup." "Well, Daddy made it, but I stirred it." Amanda glanced toward a small pot warming on a portable stove. The gesture struck her unexpectedly deep. She wasn't used to people doing things for her without expecting something in return. In her world, kindness had footnotes, favors came with paperwork, and warmth was usually a negotiation. But here, in this oil-scented garage, a child just wanted her to feel better. Amanda accepted a bowl of the soup, a simple broth, and the warmth soothed her instantly. Daniel watched her carefully, arms crossed in that protective, quietly observant way mechanics seem to have when they know machinery well enough to notice every sound, every tremor. "You were shaking when I found you," he said. Looked like someone pushed themselves way past the limit. Amanda exhaled slowly. It's been a difficult few months. She wanted to say more, maybe even confess how lonely success could feel, but the words stuck in her throat. Daniel knelt beside his daughter to help her pick up the crayons she had spilled, and Amanda noticed a tenderness in his movements that contrasted sharply with the ruggedness of his hands. He was a single father, she guessed, someone who had learned to split himself between strength and softness. The girl chattered excitedly about Amanda's dress, comparing it to princess gowns from her favorite cartoons. Daniel chuckled. "She doesn't get many visitors besides customers and engine parts. You're practically royalty to her." Amanda felt a warmth she couldn't explain flutter through her chest. Her eyes drifted around the garage, the tools neatly arranged on the walls, the spotless floor, the half-restored vintage car gleaming under a lamp. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a life. Photos of the little girl were pinned above a battered desk. Birthdays, school art, silly faces smeared with ice cream. Everything felt grounded and real, so different from the glossy skyscraper offices and curated events she inhabited. She envied it, unexpectedly. A place where everything had meaning, where effort showed, where love lingered in the corners. Daniel returned to her side, setting down her repaired phone. "It's charging now. I fixed the port, it was bent. Sorry, couldn't resist." Amanda blinked at him. "You fixed my phone." He shrugged lightly. "You looked like you needed it. And things that are broken should be fixed, not tossed." There was an unspoken message buried in that sentence, one that made Amanda swallow hard. She had been pushing herself so relentlessly that she'd forgotten what caring for herself looked like, forgotten she was human and allowed to break. Before she could respond, the little girl climbed onto Amanda's lap and curled against her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Amanda stiffened at first. No one ever touched her without scheduling it. But slowly, cautiously, she relaxed, resting a hand on the child's back. The girl smiled up at her, sleepy-eyed. "You can stay here until you feel better," she whispered, and for the first time in months, Amanda felt like someone wasn't asking anything of her, they were simply offering comfort. Amanda gently shifted the child onto the cot as she dozed off, her small hand still loosely gripping Amanda's sleeve. Watching her sleep stirred an unfamiliar ache in Amanda's chest, one made of tenderness, longing, and something she hadn't had time to feel in years, peace. Daniel dimmed the overhead light, careful not to wake his daughter. "She gets attached fast," he whispered, almost apologetically. Amanda shook her head. "It's okay. She's sweet." The words felt strange on her tongue. She wasn't used to soft things. Her days were filled with meetings, competition, expectations, but not warmth. "Not like this." Daniel motioned her toward a small workbench and pulled out a chair. "Sit. You shouldn't stand too long." She obeyed without argument, surprising even herself. Normally she bristled when someone told her what to do. As a CEO she controlled everything, down to the temperature of her conference rooms. But Daniel's tone wasn't commanding, it was caring, steady. "You haven't eaten properly," he said. "Your body's shut down. Happens to people who carry too much on their shoulders." Amanda exhaled slowly, staring at her trembling hands. "It feels like I'm always on the edge," she confessed. Daniel leaned back against the tool cabinet, arms folded. "Then you need to step back before you fall," he replied simply. His words weren't dressed in motivational jargon or corporate polish. They were blunt, honest, human. Amanda felt the truth of them settle like weight on her ribs. She suddenly wished she could tell him everything. The sleepless nights, the investors breathing down her neck, the constant fear of failure despite her success. "People think I have everything together," she murmured. "But I'm just tired." Daniel nodded. "You don't have to be bulletproof all the time." A slow silence fell between them, not awkward, but steady like the hum of machines around them. Daniel reached for a blanket folded on a shelf and draped it over her shoulders with gentle practicality. "You should rest more," he said. "You're safe here." Amanda's chest tightened. Safe. She couldn't remember the last time someone used that word about her. Not in her world of boardrooms and power suits where vulnerability was a liability. But here, with the smell of engine oil and the soft breathing of a child nearby, she believed him. She studied Daniel's face, noticing lines that spoke of responsibility, of long nights and sacrificed dreams, but also of resilience. He wasn't wealthy, not in the way her circle defined wealth, but he had something she secretly craved more than money: stability, presence, purpose. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked. Daniel shrugged lightly. "Because you needed help, and because my daughter saw you fall and told me to go get the pretty lady." Amanda felt a laugh bubble out of her, fragile but real. It felt like something inside her had cracked open. Amanda shifted on the chair, suddenly aware of the dried tears on her cheeks she hadn't even realized had fallen. Daniel didn't comment, didn't stare. He simply handed her a clean cloth, letting her keep her dignity. The small gesture nearly undid her again. "You don't know me," she said quietly. "I don't have to," he replied. Being human is enough. Her throat tightened at the simplicity of the statement. In her world, value was quantified, measured by numbers, outcomes, influence. But in this small garage, her worth wasn't tied to any of that. The little girl stirred on the cot, murmuring softly, and Amanda instinctively moved closer, adjusting the blanket around her tiny shoulders. Daniel watched, surprised but quietly touched. "She likes you," he said. Amanda smiled faintly. "I like her too." The admission surprised her, but it felt true. Maybe truer than anything she'd said in a long time. In that moment, she felt a strange sense of belonging. Not in a mansion filled with executives or in a skyscraper suite overlooking the city, but here, in a humble garage with a mechanic and his daughter. Amanda stayed seated for a long moment, absorbing the quiet, the warmth, the absence of expectation. It was strange how something so simple, a child's trust, a stranger's care, could feel revolutionary. She realized how desperately she had been craving human connection, not just power, praise, or accolades. Daniel returned to his tools, giving her space without abandoning her, a subtle balance of attention and respect. Amanda noticed the small ways he moved, how careful he was not to disrupt the little routines in the garage, how naturally protective he was. Hours passed, the city noises fading into the background, leaving only the occasional clang of metal or hum of a distant engine. Amanda and Daniel exchanged small conversation, nothing about boardrooms, investors, or deadlines. They spoke about simple things: the girl's favorite cartoons, old car models, the changing seasons. Each word felt grounding, each laugh liberating. Amanda realized she hadn't shared an ordinary thought aloud in months without calculating its impact. Here, she could speak freely and simply exist. The little girl climbed into Amanda's lap again, tugging her into a hug. "You can stay here forever," she whispered sleepily. Amanda smiled softly, brushing her fingers through the child's hair. She didn't know forever existed, but the sentiment resonated deep inside. There was a warmth here, a rhythm, a kind of life she had almost forgotten existed. She glanced at Daniel, whose face was calm but thoughtful. He nodded gently, understanding the unspoken connection forming between them. Amanda realized her phone was still charging, but she didn't care. For the first time, the outside world, the pressures, the parties, the status, seemed distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered was here, tangible: a mechanic, a little girl, the scent of oil and metal, and the genuine safety she felt in their presence. She leaned back, letting herself relax fully for the first time in months, the mechanical hums and warm atmosphere wrapping around her like a cocoon. Night deepened outside, shadows stretching across the garage floor. Amanda's eyelids grew heavy again, but this time, it wasn't exhaustion, it was comfort. She felt tethered not to ambition or reputation, but to something simpler: trust, care, and connection. The little girl's soft breathing reminded her that vulnerability didn't have to be weakness, that allowing herself to be helped could be an act of courage. Amanda realized this night might mark the beginning of a different life, one with balance and meaning. Daniel quietly tidied the workspace one last time before retreating to a small corner of the garage, careful not to disturb them. Amanda watched him go and felt a surge of gratitude she couldn't fully articulate. She had entered this garage as a fainting CEO, overwhelmed and alone. Now she was someone who had been gently rescued, nurtured, and reminded that life could be simpler, warmer, and profoundly human. Her perspective shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated, and for the first time in ages, she welcomed it. Amanda closed her eyes, the little girl snuggled against her, and let the garage's soft noises lull her into a rare, untroubled sleep. Outside, the city carried on in its relentless rhythm, but inside, time seemed suspended. A CEO who once defined herself by control and accomplishment now discovered the quiet power of connection, care, and trust. In a mechanic's garage, amid oil and steel and a small child's warmth, Amanda felt something she hadn't known she was missing, the comforting sense of being exactly where she was meant to be.